Hello, everyone. My name is Paola Gomez, and I welcome you to Artist Holistic Wellness, which is part of Ties to Community Winter Activation Program. And it is a series of online conversations, artist talks, where artists and other professionals discuss different topics that impact artists in their daily lives. Today, we are exploring food insecurity. But before we get started, I would like to take a moment, and I invite you to take a moment as well, wherever you are tuning in from, to think of the land where you live and where you work, and consider the history of that land, as well as the history in the processes of the different people that have lived on that land and that have been the stewards. In my case, I am located in the territory of the Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit. I would like to express my gratitude with Mother Earth for all the resources that we're using. And I'm also taking the time to honor all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people that had lived in this land since time immemorial. And I believe that this conversation for this evening is so relevant as we connect this with the responsibility that we have with the land and all living creatures that are in this space, and what it means to take care of each other and respect the resources that are there for us to be able to survive and live in dignity. Before we go on into today's talk, and I introduce you to Veronica, who's also going to introduce our amazing guest speaker for this evening, I would like to express my gratitude with our sponsor, Factor Canada, the foundation assisting Canadian talent on recording, for offering the supports that are needed so programs such as Ties to Community exist and have a positive impact on our communities. Without any further ado, I would like to introduce to you Veronica Gomez. Veronica is a community arts facilitator and an emerging artist. Veronica is interested in creative writing and literature, who aspires to travel the world and connect with many people. Veronica is currently working with Muse Arts, supporting different programs, and she's coordinating this important online series. Veronica, thank you very much for your presence and for all the work that you do, and this spot is all yours.
Thank you so much, Paola. Thank you so much for the amazing introduction of our online series. I want to start by recognizing the importance of today's conversation, as the well-being of artists and our communities have been highly impacted by the current public health crisis. Today, as mentioned, we'll be exploring what food insecurity means, how it's affecting our communities, and how we can bring awareness and support those affected. Remember that during our chat, the live stream is open to any questions. So if any do pop up as we're talking, please feel free and put them in the chat. If we do have time, we'll answer them at the end. Thank you. So before we move on to our amazing food insecurity talk today, I want to introduce our amazing guest speaker, Milo. Milo is an accomplished performing artist, organizer, and social interpreter. I'll give the space to Milo to introduce themselves further and talk a little bit about their practice.
Thank you so much, Veronica, and Paula as well. Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to be here and sharing my work and just, yeah, some conversation pointers. Yeah, so just a little bit about me and what I do. I kind of been moving within performance spaces, and specifically in like queer and trans performance spaces in Toronto here, for like, yeah, like over 10 years. And just being a part of a lot of just different initiatives, different programs, um, like being involved in youth programs myself, as a youth and then as a facilitator. And so that's kind of how the beginning of my entrance into different communities. And then in 2018, I decided to start up a catering business. And so with that work and um, it was important for me to, I guess, get involved into kind of like the food, I guess my love for food and my like ability to like connect with people through food. And so that really pushed me to open up this catering job, catering company. And yeah, and like it was really a focus on providing meals and providing food for community events, for different groups, and specifically youth programming, because that's actually how I got my first kind of involvement with catering and like feeding people, was actually through youth programs. Um, and yeah, so that's kind of been my focus. And so that was pre-pandemic. Unfortunately, I had to kind of stop that work as the pandemic hit, as like a one person um, company business. Um, but uh, but I've been able to like stay connected with other initiatives that have been going on throughout the city, and offering support and help that way. So yeah, that's that's what I've been doing.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. I can't wait for you to start up again and let me try a little bit of your food. I think it's an amazing initiative that you've created. So to further go into the conversation, I think it's important to acknowledge that when we choose to discuss holistic wellness, we must acknowledge that our food plays a significant role. This is why it is crucial to have open and honest conversations about food insecurity. But before we can even move into all the aspects of it, we must understand what it means to be food insecure. So that I propose the question, what is food insecurity to you? What
Yeah,
does it mean?
sure. For sure. So yeah, like as I was saying, like my first entry into doing this like food specific work was like catering for different youth programs. And the reason why that was so important to me was because, as I mentioned too, is that I was a youth myself in different youth arts programs, and the access to food was not that great through these programs. And a lot of times, like a lot of times my peers, this was like meals that they were depending on, like on the weekly basis. And so for me, that like it it always stuck with me. And so talking, like I have a lot of connections and a lot of friends who do a lot of youth programming and just like facilitation. And yeah, and like they talked about how their budgets for food isn't all that great all the time. And so how how do we work on that? How do we fix that? How do we make that a priority when it comes to like budgeting and all that kind of stuff? And so so that, again, that kind of was one of my main drives for starting up this catering business, that was going to focus on providing meals for youth programs and different community initiatives, and that sort of thing. And so yeah, and like uh yeah, so for me, like that has been my direct experience with food insecurity, has been about within like queer and trans either like youth communities or like just queer and trans communities, period, racialized, migrant, queer and trans communities that you know, don't have access to income, don't have access to jobs a lot of the times. And so it's, yeah, it's prevalent, and it's prevalent in the communities that I move through. And so yeah, that's how I would define it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So one of our goals, I think, for this event is to bring more awareness to the topic, of course, in order to support the holistic well-being of artists and our community members. But honestly, this can't be done fully until we truly comprehend the impact of food insecurity on our communities, especially now more than ever, of course, that we are facing a public health crisis. So this brings me to the question, how is food insecurity impacting our communities, and who do you think is being impacted the most?
For sure. So I mean, yeah, like I think, yeah, I mean, I pause because it's such a huge, it's such a huge thing. And so it's just like, uh, as I mentioned, right, like to the people that are being impacted the most are racialized communities, Black communities, Indigenous communities, migrant communities, and then again, it's like all the overlapping. So you kind of, you add queer and trans into the mix, you add disability into the mix of factors, and that just like skyrockets the rates of food insecurity amongst these communities. And like the impacts of that are, you know, if we're talking about artist communities, let's say, the impacts of that is, you know, where do we find like the nourishment uh to be able to like create and to like be a part of our communities, like you said, right, like food is food is everything. Food is the core of every, like every, literally everything. And so it's just, it's, if we don't have access to this, like to nourishment, then we're not going to thrive, right? And so then, and like the root of food insecurity is poverty. And so it's just one thing on top of another. And so it's crucial, it's crucial that people have access to that have access to food, and not just like, not just food, but like actual like nourishing food and variety and cultural significant food as well. So yeah, it's big. The impacts are huge.
Yes, definitely, and it's safe to say that the impacts are even more big now that we're in the pandemic, right? Because with quarantine and with everything closing or not being able to go out, the nourishment and the safety, right, of the food that you're getting is not going to be ideal. So I think it is important to acknowledge that. Um, Also, as we move within the topic of food insecurity, it's important to recognize that for some of us, the impacts of food insecurity might be something new, right? But for many of us, it's a familiar topic, as we all have experienced food insecurity in some degree, either personally or we've seen it within our communities. Yet, when we think of food insecurity, some of us relate it back to developing countries and how it's impacting their communities, right? Or how when I was back home, I experienced food insecurity a lot, et cetera, et cetera. But food insecurity has no borders, right? And it is very much prominent in Toronto, in Canada, especially with this public health crisis. So I'm curious to know, why do you think many people in Toronto are unaware of the undergoing effects of food insecurity, especially within our own communities?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I feel like the way the way that I want to answer this question, and maybe I should just say it, is that like well, okay, let me start off by saying that, yeah, so like as when the pandemic hit, um, there have been a lot of like really amazing, beautiful initiatives that have come forward, around like food justice and mutual aid, and just like, yeah, just like amazing initiatives that have come through. And a lot of these initiatives, a lot of these initiatives have also been doing this kind of work for years, even before the pandemic. And so I think like with I guess like when the pandemic hit, and just like with the surge of the different initiatives that have come forward, and getting like media attention, and just like, you know, getting just wider attention, and also just the fact that people like needed it more, needed access to these initiatives more, um that like it for as you mentioned, there's been people who never even gave food insecurity a thought. I didn't even realize that this was happening in our city, when the reality is it's probably your neighbors, like or you don't even realize how close you are yourself to you know, being food insecure. And so, um yeah, like I think like as much as it's incredible that, like, you know, all this attention is happening, it is like it is important to recognize that people have been doing frontline food justice work for years, for decades in the city. People have been fighting for food justice within their communities, um forever. Forever. And so, and I think, um yeah, like I think like my most basic response is that if I if you if you don't know, it's because you don't want to know. That that's just kind of how I frame it, like how I believe, because it's just like it's out there. The information is out there, and and so it's up to you to seek out like what is happening in your neighborhoods, what is happening in your communities, and especially, you know, as like gentrification continues to like, you know, take over the city, it's like what like where are you moving into, and like just acknowledging like what's happening. So that that's my most kind of uh just basic answer to that.
Perfect. I love how you mentioned that if you don't know, it's because you don't want to. And I think that's very true. And it also goes back to um if you're not involved, it's because you really don't want to, right? So it's the fact of knowing the cause or the issue, and then trying to fix and trying to support, right? But it all begins with being involved, or even like, oh, awareness to the topic, right? So it's clear that food insecurity, along with a lot of social issues that you mentioned before, like poverty, inequality, unemployment, etc., can harm our communities and really lead to community breakdown. So I think that healthy communities are a result of supportive public policies that consider social and health impacts, right? So as we discuss food insecurity for a while now, we understand that social and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food is fundamental for the well-being of our communities. That is very clear, right? As we move into our conversation, I think it is important to ask you, and as you've been doing it firsthand, how do we support those facing food insecurity, and how can we bring awareness to this topic?
Yeah, I mean, I think like as I mentioned a little bit already, it's just like, you know, it's finding those initiatives, it's finding uh you know, places that you can either like share, talk about, or, you know, physically be like volunteer. um uh Biggest one, monetary, like donate. Like make sure you are giving your dollars to programs, and like I would like I really, that one is really important, in the sense that like it's my personal belief that like you can really ask yourself like, you know, the idea of like financially donating can feel or seem so daunting, but it really doesn't have to be. Like you really, you can spare those dollars if you can, right? And so uh and exactly what you said too, it's like about public policy. It's about like, you know, like calling and emailing your city representatives and getting involved politically in the areas that you can to ask for yeah, just to ask for change, to ask for all of this to, because yeah, like we've been saying, it's like, so it's connected to all of these things. And so you support one thing, it's gonna be like a trickle effect. And so that would and so yeah, that's what I would say around that. And then also I think like the pandemic, one of the really great things that I feel like the in terms of this, in terms of like, yeah, like food justice and food insecurity, the pandemic has really kind of worked around like normalizing the idea of like supporting each other and like, you know, cooking a meal for other people, offering to buy meals for other people, do it like doing grocery pickups and that sort of thing. And I think, and as I mentioned too in one of our previous conversations or questions, is that like I know for me and the communities that I've worked in or that have moved through, like we we've been doing that for each other for a really long time. And so and so it's not a new concept. And so it's just about normalizing that now, and that like we can do that for each other. We can uh do that community care work that has been around forever. And yeah, and it's more, it's important as ever now. So yeah.
Yes, I 100% agree with you. And I love how you touched on the topic of normalizing that we can do this, right? And not being afraid to, oh, but if I cook for them or if I give them something, they might think I'm overstepping or that they need it, right? So thank you so much for bringing that to light. I think that was very important. And a question that I have is, was it hard to start an initiative? Is it something that a regular people can do?
I think like I think it's about like I know for me, like what has helped me, like, and what I like owe so much gratitude and just like appreciation is that, as I mentioned, it's like I, for so many years I was moving through all different kinds of communities within like queer and trans or queer and trans performing spaces, or just yeah. And so I gained a good network of people. And so without their support, I wouldn't be able to do the work that I have been able to do. But that being said, it is a matter of um yeah, like I think it is about kind of getting over those fears of like connecting. And so it's like, if you find out an initiative and you have an idea too, it's like, you know, finding those people, like even just your friends, it's like like bouncing ideas off of each other. And I wouldn't say like, I would kind of be careful around hmm, like this idea of like, I don't know, just like just starting something, because there might be already something similar, right? And so it's just about, and so it's about like recognizing um where you can be the most beneficial to. And so yeah, I guess that's what I would say to that.
Perfect. I loved how we're now talking about community involvement, right? And like finding your community and how they can help you be an interpreter, of course, So I think that is very important and a fact to keep in mind when you're starting your own business, especially in the food industry, right? Because everybody now, especially with the pandemic, they got into food. Like food was everything. Food is everything.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important to kind of find your spark and your community to help you evolve, because it can definitely be done if you put your all into it. I think so, yeah. So now we're going to go ahead and answer some questions from the chat. Thank you so much for everybody that's joined in and that tuned in. Thank you so much for being here. And of course, if you have any other questions, just feel free and put them into the chat. We'll answer them. So the first one we had was, what do you think about food banks and the foods that are provided? Do you think they meet our standards of nutrition? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think like I know that there were definitely different call outs that I saw like before the pandemic, but also very specifically throughout the pandemic, where food banks or people that I knew who were connected to food banks were doing call outs for like different kinds of foods, because I think like for so long there's just been this idea of like, oh, okay, yeah, let's just donate like pasta and canned food, and it's so like I remember that from even when I was like in elementary school. It's like that's what you're taught to donate. And so how do you disrupt that? And it's like, people, yeah, like people who are food insecure, who are experiencing food insecurity, like it's not just about, like I was mentioning earlier, it's like it's not just about getting food and just eating. It's about like people have dietary restrictions, people have, like their culturally specific foods that they have every right to have access to. And so it's like, yeah, it's about expanding our idea of like what it means to donate food, and like so yeah. That's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I remember in school, not too long ago, they would ask the bare minimum, right, to donate, and it's like we can do better, honestly, but we weren't really taught or asked to do better. So it's what, of course, anything you bring in is always appreciated. That's 100%. But it's the fact that we can go above and beyond in our donations, but we just choose to overlook that or just not do it, right?
Okay.
So, and it's implemented from schools, definitely from a younger age. So thank you so much for bringing that up. Another question we have is, food is such a sensitive topic. People are starving, and it seems that society has put a shame on this fact. What do you think about the statement?
Could you repeat it again one more time?
Yeah, of course. Food is such a sensitive topic. People are starving, and it seems that society has put a shame on this fact.
Yeah, and I think like definitely there's stigma attached to it, and I think it goes back to like how I was mentioning. It's like yeah, it's like about normalizing that, like offering to cook meals and offering, and but not only that, it's like normalizing reaching out, normalizing like, asking friends that, I can't have dinner tonight, like is anyone like that. That's something that for me, in my experience in my communities, specifically speaking to like queer and trans disabled communities, I saw like a few years back, people started posting on their social media page of just being like, can anyone order me food tonight? And so like the first times that I saw that, like it was so impactful and so huge, like, and so it's just, yeah, it's just like disrupting that stigma, disrupting that like food is a right for all of us. And so how do we offer, and also how do we ask, and without that shame attached to it?
Yes, 100% agreed with that. It's very important to of course have this conversation, so that people, tuning in or watching this video after, know that it's okay to speak out. food is obviously a very sensitive topic, but it's okay because you are supported and there is support out there for you. So it's definitely something that can be done. Another thing mentioned in the comments was that children in some schools, they have meal programs, but during the lockdown and the pandemic, they didn't have access to this food. So it is not ideal. Of course, like when you go home and you're in a food insecure household, how do you think that impacted the children?
Oh, huge. I'm sure, like huge, and like, um, yeah, just like everything that we've talked about today, and that's why. Well, I guess like my go-to right now, what I was about to say was, that's why the initiatives that have come forward, that have come about, are so significant and so important. But also it does speak to government as well. It's like, how do we how is the government okay knowing that there are children going hungry? Like, it's just so, as much as I want to push like initiatives and like support that way, but it's also a part of the bigger picture of it. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It was something that's talked about, that food insecure security is a social issue, right? It goes hand in hand with unemployment. Of course, poverty is a big one. And it's just, how do we come to the root? How do we fix the root problem, right? And then we can talk about food insecurity and not letting kids go hungry. Um, I think that is very important. And it's also important to acknowledge that this is happening currently in Toronto. And like you said, it could be happening to our neighbors, it could be happening to us, but we just haven't acknowledged this yet, right?
Yeah.
So thank you so much for bringing that to light. Another question I had for you is how do we start this conversation? How do you think is an appropriate way to start these conversations within our community or even our families?
Hmm. Hmm. I mean, I think it's about, I mean, it could even just be, about sharing the work that people are doing already. You find out about, you find out about, yeah, like an initiative or a program, and just and starting the conversation from there. And then, um and yeah, and then, as I mentioned, if you're in a place where you can offer support, just kind of like, for example, like the what it something some of the ways that I've done it myself is I would, put it on my social media, and I would just be like, hey everyone, I'm cooking soup enough for like 20 people. Like, let me know if anyone can have, if anyone would like some soup today. And so it's just kind of, obviously if you have the capacity to do that kind of stuff, like I for me, it comes from a place of just like loving to cook for people all the time. And so, there were moments throughout my like 2 years of doing the catering where I would have like extra ingredients or whatever the case. And so I would put it out there, and I would just be like, hey, like, anybody, can anybody have, or would anyone like like some soup, or whatever it was that I was cooking. So yeah, well, stuff like that, I guess.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think it's very important, the initiative that you brought to perspective and the initiative you brought to life. Again, I'm still up to try anything that you make. That's definitely gonna have to be on the calendar. But
Sure.
yeah, I think it's amazing that you did this and that we're privileged enough to be able to do initiatives like this, right? Not everybody can, but the fact that you took this into consideration, and of course you said that this all started with youth and how you saw the problem and you took action, I think that's very inspiring.
Thank
So thank you. Another question we have from the chat is there any economical gain in solving the issue of hunger?
Economical gain. Economical gain in kind of what sense? Like, I feel like I feel like because like how we've been talking, right? Everything is so layered. And so, we start putting support into one thing, it'll start trickling into all across the board. And so if people are being nourished, if people are having access to work, if people have access to supports, if they're disabled and sick, like it's like the I mean, economical gain is that you have, nourished people who are thriving. Like that should be the goal. And so I don't know, I guess that would be my response to that.
Yeah, I think as we mentioned before, when you have safe and nutritious food, from then on, like, the world is your oyster, as they say. Like, you can do anything that you want. But once you're food insecure or you're undernourished, it's hard to complete daily tasks, right? And it also goes back to our whole goal of this online series, which is mental health, right? It can really affect your mental health if you're food insecure or just in general, right? So I think it's very true what you said about trickling down. Once you get to the root of one issue, oh, just, it's up from there, right? So yeah. Another question is I honestly want to know, what was your most challenging experience dealing with food insecurity communities?
Well, I the first thing that comes to my mind is so last year in November, in honor of Trans Day of Remembrance, I myself and a few friends, we decided to do a dinner delivery drive. And so and I simultaneously also did a fundraiser too, to like raise funds. Well, initially it was just to cover expenses, but then like the donations just came in, and I was able to, or we were able to, not only cover our expenses but also send money to people so that they can get their own food as well if they were outside of our delivery zone. And so I bring that initiative up because we were able to feed, so directly deliver 60 meals, and then on top of that, just with the donations, and it was huge. It was such a, like, like I was grateful for the opportunity to be able to do that, but also following that dinner delivery drive, I had people, reach out to me. It's like, oh, is this something that you do? Is this something that you do regularly? Or like, I would love a meal, every week if I could. We had people contacting us from like internationally. And so I think for me, it was like, we accomplished this thing. We accomplished this one project, and it was beautiful, and it was, great. And we reached out to as many people as we could. But then there was people that, that still needed. And so for me, that it became a challenge, because it was just like, how is this happening? Like, how,
Yeah, how do you reach
like,
all those that need, right?
yeah,
All those
exactly.
affected.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah. So yeah, my challenge is like, how to, yeah. So that's I would say that.
Okay, yeah, it's a very valid challenge, and I think it's something that we all face when we're trying to help our communities. It's like, how do I do the most for the
Yeah.
people that deserve it, right? And it's all community work, and it's all effort. And the fact that this initiative even took place is amazing, and you should feel really proud of that, because that's really good to hear, and it's something that can definitely be done in the future, right? I know if you reach out, people are really willing to support. We have good hearts, and if we hear about an initiative, and we've seen this over the pandemic, how this has happened, right? People are willing to support. People will support any idea, right? Especially when we're talking about community works. Definitely, people are really open to this conversation. So that's something that's very motivating, of course. Um, so for any last thoughts, any last things you would like to say about food insecurity, and how we can help support those affected and bring awareness to this very important topic?
Yeah, I mean, I just think yeah, just like everything we've been touching on. And I mean, yeah, I mean, it's even bigger than this conversation. And so it's about, yeah, it's about that awareness. It's about um just like recognizing how close we are to food insecurity, whether that's directly or the people that we care about or people that we know, people that we engage with on a daily basis. And um yeah, like so we're all connected. um and so and food is something that is so good at bringing people together. And so um yeah.
Definitely, yeah. Food has always been something so big to me and my community. So I think it's definitely, if you have the resources, I think it's a very useful, powerful tool to have, to bring communities together, to bring people of different communities together. You know, you always hear about an event, and if food is there, people are there. Like there's no end to it, right?
Yeah.
So it's amazing to bring that to light, and having this conversation with you really opened a lot of perspectives. I know for the viewers, they had a lot of important questions, and I think it was really crucial to have this conversation, especially right now that we are dealing with a pandemic, and we do need to bring awareness to this topic, because it's something that's it's been getting worse, really. So it's not going to end anytime soon. We have to go to the root of the problem and then try to fix it up from there, of course. But one individual like you, starting up of course, your initiatives, stuff like that can just really help. It can help a lot. It can help a lot of families, a lot of individuals. And I think it's something that we can all do, right? Or at least form part of. So yeah. Our event has come to an end. And of course, I want to thank Paola, the program director, for even creating the space, and creating the space for me and you, for other guests to come into the space and really talk about important issues regarding our mental health, and of course our holistic wellness. I also want to give a tremendous thank you to our amazing guest speaker, of course, Milo. Thank you so much for sharing your perspectives and taking the time to be here today. Thank you so much. And of course, our last thank you goes out to the viewers and those watching this video after. Thank you so much for being a part of this and always supporting initiatives as we've talked about. Thank you for being here and honoring yourself as well as our communities. A reminder that we will be live streaming our next session of Artist Talks Holistic Wellness Series next Tuesday, March 16. We will be discussing holistic healing, talking a little bit about grief and healing, a short meditation, and a therapeutic art activity. So it's going to be an amazing one. I hope to see you all there next week. Have an amazing evening, everyone.